To start off tonight, I just want to say, first of all, hello to my Buddha shit kicker friend, and say thank you to her for her birthday wishes, and also say that what you passed on to me or on to us this week was really meaningful to me and made my week. So I haven't stopped thinking about you. I think it's so strange that people could be so far away and have never met and connect in the way that this seems to connect with some people. So I'm so happy. You know, when you talk about having realizations in front of the Gohonzon from your Daimoku, that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. So just continue. Don't let anybody bother you with what they think or how they perceive you. You are who you are.
Yes.
Like President Ikeda says, there's no need to be swayed by other people's opinions. Just press forwards cheerfully and confidently on the path of your own unique mission.
Yes.
In accord with the principle of cherry, plum, peach, and damson, strive in a way that's true to yourself. So Daisaku Ikeda does not emphasize conformity, okay, or becoming a unity that wipes out differentiation, okay? The acknowledged reality of life is that we are all different, and we all have different missions, and we all have different functions as it relates to the law as bodhisattvas of the earth. It's, you know, like last week he says, no matter who you are, there's a group of people that only you can introduce Buddhism to. You'll be the only person that will be able to influence them in the way that you're able to influence them. That's what you're always striving for, constantly. Nothing more than that. You don't have to be a national leader. You don't have to be any kind of a leader. But if your spirit is correct, you're always a leader. Okay? Because what you're leading, what you have your allegiance to is really the Buddhism of sowing, Nichiren's teaching. All right? So, I wanted to thank also Mr. Lee for inspiring last week's conversation. And I realized after I watched the video that I never threw in the kicker for why I told the Great Grunyon benefit. I had not been able to receive my Gohonzon because of my boss's opposition to me being able to receive my Gohonzon. He specifically wouldn't let me off on the Sunday to go do Gokaihi because that was his day off. He'd have to sub for me. But moreover, he didn't want me to get involved in Buddhism because of his Catholicism. Okay? So it was after, and I had been going to meetings and I was still getting benefits. I hadn't received Gohonzon, but after those fish, I begged. I said, I begged, please, I've got to get a Gohonzon no matter what. I mean, I don't care what I got to do. This guy's keeping me from getting it. That's not right. I can't do anything about that, but I want my Gohonzon now. You know, I'm pursuing this now. So that's why, again, you guys all know this. I mentioned it several times. There used to be, in the olden days, a way that you could receive the Gohonzon because there weren't so many temples everywhere, and quite often they had to be, you know, transported by lay people. So they would actually be received in the spirit of what they called proxy. You would actually receive your Gohonzon by proxy. So somebody else picked up my Gohonzon for me. I didn't go Kaihi until 6 months later after I had won over my manager. Actually, he got transferred. The other thing from last week is my hair was not down to here, it was up to here. I'd already cut it because I'd become assistant manager. Beyond that, I think it was a pretty accurate expression of what I experienced. But Mr. Lee, the thing that's leading us into this week's conversation, and I forgot to mention it as we closed last week, what we're going to start reading tonight is the object of devotion for observing the mind established in the fifth 500-year period after the thus come one's passing on page 354 of the volume 1 of the writings of Nichiren Daishonin. And, the reality is that when you talk about earthly desires equal enlightenment, for me, I started out by just chanting. But I would have to say for anybody that I encourage to chant, I also have to encourage you somehow to receive the Gohonzon, because it is an essential aspect of attaining Buddhahood in your present form as it relates to Nichiren's teachings. He's going to explain that right now in this Gosho. Okay? And if you're not aware of that, I'm going to try and help you become more aware of it. The bottom line is that the object of devotion of the essential teaching changes and is considered different things by different people, different schools. Nichiren Shu doesn't consider the object of devotion the Gohonzon at all. Okay? Nichiren Shoshu obviously considers the Daigohonzon the object of devotion. You know, what's morphed into the thinking and the philosophy of the SGI has been really ultimately that this exists within our lives. It's the entity of the law that is one with us as human beings, one with all life throughout the three existences, okay? It's inseparable. And so, let me start tonight by reading the background to the object of devotion of observing the mind. That starts on page 377, pardon me. Then we'll go to the cover letter, because the cover letter's got to be read first, and then I'll start on page 365 where we were, or 354 a minute ago. Okay? So starting with the background on the object of devotion for observing the mind. You with me?
Yes.
Page 377 is where the background starts. Nichiren Daishonin completed this work, one of his most important, in the 4th month of 1273 during his exile at Ichinosawa on the island of Sado. It was addressed specifically to Toki Jonin, a leading disciple who lived in Shimosa province, and its cover letter instructed that because it revealed the Daishonin's ultimate teaching, because it revealed his ultimate teaching, it should be shown only to those with strong faith. In another of his major works, The Opening of the Eyes, written on Sado Island a year earlier, the Daishonin explains the object of devotion in terms of the person. He declares that he is endowed with the three virtues of sovereign teacher and parent, implying that he is the Buddha of the latter day of the law who leads all people to Buddhahood. In the present work, the Daishonin explains the object of devotion in terms of the law and declares that the Gohonzon that embodies the law of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is the object of devotion in the latter day. Faith and practice based on the Gohonzon enable everyone to perceive the Buddha nature in his or her own life and attain Buddhahood, because it's really what the Gohonzon is for, right? It's a reflection of that reality. 4 important elements are contained in the full title of this work. The object of devotion for observing the mind established in the 5th 500-year period after the thus come one's passing. They are the time, the Buddhist teaching, the people's capacity, and the law, all contained within that title. Concerning the time, a Buddha appears in accordance with the deep desire of the people to see him. The time for his advent is defined as the 5th 500-year period after the thus come one, Shakyamuni, has passed. Concerning the Buddhist teaching, this is indicated by the word established. Established, right? The object of devotion, established, okay? In establishing the Gohonzon, which had never been revealed before, which had remained until that point hidden in the depths of the lifespan chapter, right? Because that's the 3 great secret laws. That's where this is all coming. That's what's all coming about, okay? It's the invocation, it's the Gohonzon, and it's where the object of devotion is enshrined, right? That's the basis of his teaching as far as we're concerned, all right? He says, concerning the Buddhist teaching that is indicated by the word established, in establishing the Gohonzon, Nichiren Daishonin, considering the people's capacity, depicted the essence of the Lotus Sutra, or the law he perceived. The people's capacity means that for observing the true nature of the mind, the law is indicated by the phrase the object of devotion. Nichiren Daishonin embodied in the object of devotion the state of life he enjoyed as the eternal Buddha, so that people could attain the same condition of enlightenment. Eternal Buddha, original teacher. A description of the Gohonzon in the text includes a depiction of the ceremony of the transmission of the law. Myoho Renge-kyo appears in the center of the tower with the Buddha Shakyamuni and many treasures seated to the right and left, and flanking them, the 4 bodhisattvas, followers of Shakyamuni, led by superior practices. This is from page 366. The text of this Gosho may be broadly divided into 4 sections. The first section explains the doctrine of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. The Daishonin elucidates this doctrine by referring to the works of the great teacher Tentai of China, who based his exposition on the Lotus Sutra, and the works of other Chinese scholars. The second section discusses the meaning of observing the mind. Tentai established a complex practice of meditation as a means to perceive the true nature of one's own life. This was to observe one's mind, or to perceive all 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, from Nichiren Sanzen, right? Here, the Daishonin proclaims that the practice of observing one's mind in the latter day of the law is none other than to chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo with firm faith in the true object of devotion, with firm faith in the true object of devotion, okay? Saying, Shakyamuni's practices and the virtues he consequently attained are all contained within the 5 characters of Myoho Renge-kyo. If we believe in these 5 characters, we will naturally be granted the same benefits as he was. This is the principle that embracing the true object of devotion is in itself enlightenment. And again, when we're saying true object of devotion, we are specifically referring to the Gohonzon. The third section describes the Gohonzon, the object of devotion, by classifying the entire body of the Buddhist teachings into 3 categories: preparation, revelation, and transmission. In terms of the Daishonin's teachings, preparation includes all the teachings of all the Buddhas throughout time and space. Revelation is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the law implied in the depths of the lifespan chapter. And transmission, the teachings of all Buddhas seen in the light of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, which would include us. Okay? The Daishonin asserts that Shakyamuni's is the Buddhism of the harvest, meaning that he expounded his enlightenment as an effect only, without revealing the cause. The Daishonin's teaching, however, is called the Buddhism of sowing, for it teaches the cause for attaining enlightenment directly, thus guiding people compassionately in their quest for the ultimate state of life. In this section, Nichiren Daishonin identifies the object of devotion implied in the lifespan chapter as the entity of the law for propagation in the latter day. Okay? Do you understand how that all links together then? The original teacher, the eternal Buddha, the Gohonzon, your life, your faith, Kosen Rufu, Bodhisattva of the earth. You see how that's all linked up, right? There's no separation from any of in any way of any of the things that I just mentioned. Okay? But that's difficult to believe, difficult to understand. He's going to go into all that. In this section, Nichiren Daishonin identifies the object of devotion implied in the lifespan chapter as the entity of the law for propagation in the latter day. He states that the bodhisattvas of the earth will surely appear in the world to establish the supreme object of devotion, and we have. The fourth section brings the treatise to a close by declaring that the eternal Buddha, who appears in the latter day of the law, he's talking about himself, will establish the Gohonzon of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo out of profound compassion for the people of that age, which is what Nichiren did, who are ignorant of the principle of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. And understand, what does he just say there? This is very key, the principle of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. Because what is the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life? It's Ichinen Sanzen, but what is it? It's a theory. It's a theory. It's not actual Ichinen Sanzen. It's theoretical Ichinen Sanzen. That's the difference, and that's what the Daishonin is going to qualify right now. Okay? So, going into, then I got to read the cover letter. Cover letter on page 377 at the top. I have received an unlined robe, 3 sumi ink sticks, and 5 writing brushes. I have written down some of my thoughts concerning the doctrine of observing the mind. I am sending the treatise to Ota Kyoshinbo and the others. It explains an important matter that concerns me, Nichiren, and must be kept secret, because I'm declaring things about myself there that are going to put me in harm's way if people utilize them for the sake of persecuting me. Only those of single-minded faith who can believe everything I say without question should be allowed to read it. All right? So this was so high power, it was kept from people that were not established believers in the Daishonin's teachings. The treatise contains many difficult points and few answers. The treatise contains many difficult points and few answers. What it reveals, however, has never been heard of before and is bound to startle those who read or hear of it. If you do show it to others, never allow 3 or 4 persons to read it together at one time so that they can start discussing it from state of delusion and warp each other's perspective. All right? In the more than 2,200 years since the Buddha's passing, the heart of this treatise has never been revealed before. So this is the first time everything I'm going to read to you has ever been written down the way it was written down in this letter. All right? Despite the official persecution facing me, I expound it now in the 5th 500-year period. In other words, even though I know this is going to make the shit hit the fan even more, I don't care. I got to say it because it's the truth. I expound it now in the 5th 500-year period when the time is ripe for its propagation. I hope those who read it will remain firm in their faith so that both teacher and disciples can together reach the pure land of Eagle Peak and behold the reverence of the faces of Shakyamuni Buddha, many treasures Buddha, and the Buddhas of the 10 directions. With my deep respect, Nichiren. Now again, this is a cover letter. Okay? So him giving that kind of homage to Shakyamuni Buddha, many treasures, and the Buddha's 10 directions is synonymous with him. Okay? There's no separation between those Buddhas. Are there any separation between any Buddhas? No. Okay? Just understand it's a provisional Buddha or a true Buddha. That's the only difference. All right? So the object of devotion for observing the mind starts on page 354. It's a question and answer format. It's very cool. It's a very profound work. I'm not qualified actually to read it to you, but I'm going to do my best. All right. Volume 1 of Great Concentration and Insight states. Now, when he says that right there, what's he talking about? When we read the first sentence, what is he leading off with? According to Tintai's teaching, okay? Volume 1 of Great Concentration and Insight. And what is Great Concentration and Insight, by the way? Was that the first of the 3 major works? The second or the third? It was the third. It was the last, okay? And again, was not written until the end of Chang'an's life by Chang'an as a dissertation on what he had been taught and what he had practiced by Shakyamuni. All right. So volume 5 of Great Concentration and Insight states, and so what he's going to start out is by saying, okay, everything in the Lotus School, Tintai, Myolo, Dingyo, okay, everything up to this point has been leading to me. To my advent is what he's actually intimating, and the Buddhism of sowing being revealed. Okay, so he's saying, in order to help you make the bridge between Buddhism of harvest and Buddhism of sowing, I'm going to go back to the most relevant, updated perspectives that were put 1,000 years after Shakyamuni's death, more than that. Okay, as far as Tintai's dissertations, do you understand? All right. So first thing he's going to do is qualify to Toki Jonin why all this stuff meshes with the teachings of Tintai, where the teachings of Tintai got twisted, and how that relates to his advent and his teaching of the Buddhism of sowing. Let's say it says, life at each moment is endowed with the 10 worlds. At the same time, each of the 10 worlds is endowed with all 10 worlds, so that an entity of life actually possesses 100 worlds. Each of these worlds in turn possesses 30 realms, which means that in the 100 worlds there are 3,000 realms. The 3,000 realms of existence are all possessed by life in a single moment. If there is no life, that is the end of the matter. So what is he saying there then? What's he qualifying as the essential aspect of everything being? Alive or death. If you're alive, every living thing has 3,000 realms in it. Okay? If there is no life, that is the end of the matter. If it's a dead thing, if it's an inert thing, then it becomes part of the environment, right? If there is the slightest bit of life, it contains all 3,000 realms. So he's going to go into this, so wait. This is what we mean when we speak of the region of the unfathomable. Okay, so what did he just say? He just said, everything I just discussed is so heavy
that you cannot
understand it.
Okay, but
okay?
It's a kind of...
Right, well, what he's trying to do, he's trying to give it...
What about the word eternity in this case? Eternity, the life, eternal state of life. No? No? No, I'm thinking about the... Well, okay. It's a continuity.
It's always... Again, so this moment is all that exists. Right?
Yeah.
But this moment has been preceded by infinite moments, and this moment will be, in the future there will be infinite moments. So there is no separation between any moment of life in reality, because it's a continuum. It's a continuum. That's the whole idea. That's the reason there's no separation between you and anything else. Anything else, past, present, or future. It all comes from the same source. It's ultimately a manifestation of the law. Okay? That's what he's trying to explain. This is how we bypass all of that heavy theoretical construct and incorporate it as something that's actualized in our living, everyday experience. So he says, all right, this is what we mean when we speak of the region of the unfathomable. Okay? This is a theoretical construct. It's to let you get your head around what that concept is, how it could be, so that you can accept it. Because you will only manifest it through faith and practice. So if you have no clue what predication is, difficult to have faith without just being blind faith. And without having an understanding of it, it's very difficult to practice in accord with the teaching. You have to understand what the teaching is before you're going to practice in accord with the teaching, right?
Yes.
Right. So what he's now doing is he's saying, this is Tentai's teaching, so that we have that as an understanding on the front end. Then I'm going to go into how that's different than what I say. And also what it actually says versus what many of the leading scholars say it says. Okay? Because once again, most people don't read sutras outside of their school. Okay, so they heard it said this or they heard it said that. They have an understanding. That's what they teach to people in comparison to their school sutra. Do you understand? So he's saying discard all of that gobbledygook. If you would study to the degree that I have studied, this is the way it is. Note, and because we sometimes go 10 times 10 times 10 times 3 and get to that 3,000 that way. And here he's going 10 times 10 times 30. Okay? So... he says, note, 3,000 realms might also be read as 3,000 factors, but the number is the same. The only difference lies in the method of expansion. Another copy of Great Concentration and Insight states each world is endowed with the 3 realms of existence. So in other words, you can calculate it either way. It's a theoretical construct. It's a theoretical concept. 3,000 realms in a single moment of existence doesn't exist in reality. A hard number like 3,000, there are 3,000 realms. That's all there are.
Why 3?
Yeah, it's to get you to be able to understand the concept that Buddhahood is there all the time. That's really what its function is. It's not to give you a mathematical process of equating how many worlds could you be in. Okay? It's a theoretical construct so that you can begin to understand and accept the predication that the Daishonin's teaching is based on. This is the whole thing. That's what Tentai's teaching was based on. That's what Myolo's teaching was based on. That's what Dengyo's teaching was based on. Do you understand? But it wasn't until Tentai that the 10 worlds came into play. Because Tentai is the one that came... We've read the Lotus Sutra. Did you see 10 worlds in there anywhere? No, 10 factors, yes. Okay, so, question. This is the first question. Question. Is the principle that we just discussed, 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, explained in the profound meaning of Lotus Sutra, the first of the 3 major writings of Tentai? Myolo states that it is not, is the answer. Question. Then is it explained in the words and phrases of the Lotus Sutra? Answer. Myolo states that it is not. Question. What are his exact words? Answer. He says none of them reveal that a single moment of life contains the 3,000 realms. Those words, that teaching isn't in any of those 2 previous works. Is this principle mentioned in any of the first 4 volumes of Great Concentration and Insight? I think there's 6 volumes to that, I'm not sure. He says, is there any mention of this in even the first part of Great Makishikan? No, it is not. Question, what proof is there of this? Answer, Myolo says, when at last he, Tiantai, revealed the method of meditation in great concentration and insight, he at the same time employed the 3,000 realms as a way to understand. He employed it as a way to understand. Question, Volume 2 of Profound Meaning states, in other words, he's going back now. The way he'll do this, he'll ask questions, he'll answer the question, and then he'll confront himself because he knows somebody's out there is going to have a smart comeback and say, well, no, Profound Meaning says this. Question, Volume 2 of Profound Meaning states each of the 10 worlds contains the other 9, and in those 100 worlds are 1,000 factors. Volume 1 of Words and Phrases states each sense field is endowed with the 10 worlds, each of which again is endowed with all of the 10 within itself. Since each of those 100 worlds is endowed with the 10 factors, the total becomes 1,000. The profound meaning of the Perceiver of the World Sound chapter comments, the 10 worlds are all mutually inclusive, thus making 100 worlds. 1,000 factors are inherent in life. Even though these are not visible, life by its nature possesses all of them. Isn't the principle of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life mentioned in the first 4 volumes of Great Concentration and Insight? Nichiren, Myolo says it is not. Question, what does he say exactly? Answer, Volume 5 of the Annotations on Great Concentration and Insight reads, in comparison with the chapter on correct meditation, the preceding chapters fall short of describing the practice in its entirety. Okay, now does everybody know the annotations of on Great Concentration and Insight? What does that mean? Okay. Great Concentration and Insight, contents of that work is from Tentai. The person that actually put it down and expressed it for everybody to maintain and understand what Tentai's teaching was his disciple Chang'an. And then generationally, a couple, 200-300 years later, Myolo was born. Okay, Myolo then understood Tentai. They even said there must be a reincarnation at Tentai. You understand that? So he wrote 3 works that are commentaries on profound meaning and immeasurable meanings and great concentration and insight. So whenever you see annotations of any of these title names, those are all from Myolo. Okay. Volume 5 of Annotations on Great Concentration and Insight reads, in comparison with the chapter on correct meditation, the preceding chapters fall short of describing the practice in its entirety, but they do contain the 25 preparatory exercises that lead to understanding, and thus they provide the expedient means to the correct practice. Not the correct practice, but a means of being able to achieve and understand what the correct practice is. The first 6 chapters, then, are all meant to bring about understanding conceptually. Everybody's with me? All right. Also in the same volume, when at last he revealed the method of meditation in Great Concentration and Insight, the last of the 3 works, at the end of that work, he at the same time employed the 3,000 realms as a way to understand. This principle is the ultimate revelation of his final and supreme teaching. That is why Chang'an states in his introduction to Great Concentration and Insight, Great Concentration and Insight reveals the teaching that Tiantai Chi himself practiced in the depths of his being, similar to the Daishonin prior to inscribing the Gohonzon, right? He had good reason for saying this. I hope that those who read this work and seek to understand it will not allow their minds to be distracted by anything else. That's Myolo said all that. Tentai Chi propagated his teachings for 30 years. During the first 29 years, expounding the doctrines contained in Profound Meanings, Words and Phrases, and other works. He explained the 5 periods and the 8 teachings, as well as the 100 worlds and 1,000 factors. He not only refuted the erroneous doctrines of the preceding more than 500 years, but also clarified matters that had not been fully explained by the Buddhist scholars of India. The great teacher Chang'an. So again, Tiantai, without Tiantai, none of this would have gone forward. Without Nello making these qualifications, without Dingyo then doing everything with ordination platform. All of this is all in keeping with the karma of those individuals. The great teacher Chang'an states, even the great scholars of India were not in a class with him. And the Chinese teachers, well, one need hardly mention them. This is no idle boast. The doctrine he taught was indeed of such excellence. How pitiful that Tintai's successors allowed those thieves, the founders of the Flower Garland and True Words schools, which did not exist when he originally wrote this, to steal the priceless gem of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life and then, ironically, become their followers. The great teacher Chang'an was fully aware this would happen when he remarked in sorrow, if this teaching should be lost, it would be a tragedy for the future. Question. What is the difference? This is really cool. What is the difference between the principle of the 100 worlds and 1,000 factors and that of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life? Answer. The former concerns only sentient beings, only actual living things. All right? But the latter applies to both sentient and insentient beings. Okay? You with me? It includes the realm of the environment. Question. If insentient beings are endowed with the 10 factors, trees, plants, pebbles, stones, is it correct to assume that plants and trees have minds that can attain Buddhahood like sentient beings? Sentient beings? Answer. This is a difficult matter that is difficult to believe and difficult to understand. Tintai defined 2 points that are difficult to believe and difficult to understand. One lies in the realm of doctrinal teachings and the other in the realm of meditative practice. With regard to the former, in the sutras preached before the Lotus Sutra, we read that persons of the two vehicles and each kantikas, people of incorrigible disbelief or persons of incorrigible disbelief, are forever barred from attaining Buddhahood. And that Shakyamuni Buddha, the Lord of Teachings, attained enlightenment for the first time in this world, under the Bodhi tree, right? Nevertheless, because it's not until the lifespan chapter, he says, no, that wasn't when it began. Nevertheless, we find that the theoretical and the essential teachings of the Lotus Sutra repudiate both of these statements. One Buddha who says two things as opposite as fire and water, who could believe him? In other words, what he said before the Lotus Sutra and then what he revealed in the Lotus Sutra, who could believe him? This is the point that is difficult to believe and difficult to understand in the realm of doctrinal teachings, because there are conflicts in what he says when he says them. The point that is difficult to believe and difficult to understand in the realm of meditative practice concerns the principle of the 3,000 worlds and 1,000 factors and that of the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, which explains that even insentient beings are endowed with the 10 factors of life and that they are endowed with both material and spiritual aspects. Both the Buddhist and non-Buddhist scriptures permit wooden or painted images to be used as objects of devotion, but Tintai and his followers were the first to explain the principle behind this practice. If a piece of wood or paper lacked the cause and effect of Buddhahood in either the material or the spiritual aspect, it would be futile to rely on it as an object of devotion. Question. Everybody's with me?
Yeah.
Okay. Question. What authority do you have for stating that a plant, a tree, or a land manifests cause and effect or the 10 factors? Answer. Volume 5 of Great Concentration and Insight says, the realm of the environment also has the 10 factors. Thus an evil land has appearance, nature, entity, power, and so on. Volume 6 of Annotations on the Profound Meaning of Lotus Sutra states, appearance exists only in what is material. Nature exists only in what is spiritual. Entity, power, influence, and relation in principle combine both the material and the spiritual. Internal cause and latent effect are purely spiritual. Manifest effect exists only in what is material. The diamond scalpel states, and I believe that's Miolo, right? Yeah, it is. The diamond scalpel states A plant, a tree, a pebble, a speck of dust, each has the Buddha nature, and each is endowed with cause and effect and with the function to manifest and the wisdom to realize its Buddha nature. Now, if there's no separation between all things, that's real easy to go, okay, that's cool, I can understand that. All right? You have to be able to get your head around that reality. Question. You have told us about the source of this doctrine, Tentayam Yola. Now, what is meant by the observation of the mind? The observation of the mind means to observe one's own mind and to find the 10 worlds within it, because that's actually Chinensan. Now it's not a theoretical construct. When you can accomplish that, you've done the actual observing of the mind that we're referring to. I'll say it again. Answer. The observation of the mind means to observe one's own mind and to find the 10 worlds within it. This is what is called observing the mind. For example, though we can see the 6 sense organs of other people, we cannot see our own. Only when we look into a clear mirror do we see for the first time that we are endowed with all 6 sense organs. Similarly, various sutras make reference here and there to the 6 paths and the 4 noble worlds that constitute the 10 worlds, but only in the clear mirror of the Lotus Sutra and of the great teacher Tentai's great concentration and insight can one see one's own 10 worlds, 100 worlds, and 1,000 factors, and 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. Question. What part of the Lotus Sutra do you refer to, and what section of Tentai's commentaries? Answer. The Expedient Means chapter in Volume 1 of the Lotus Sutra states, the Buddhas, plural, we read this last week again, the Buddhas wish to open the door of Buddha wisdom to the all living beings. This refers to the world of Buddhahood inherent in the 9 worlds. The Lifespan chapter states, thus, since I attained Buddhahood, an extremely long period of time has passed. My lifespan is an immeasurable number of asamyak kalpas, and during that time I have constantly abided here without ever entering extinction. Good men, originally I practiced the Bodhisattva way, and the lifespan that I acquired then has yet to come to an end, but will last twice the number of years that have already passed. Here the sutra refers to the 9 worlds inherent in Buddhahood. The sutra states, Devadatta will be called the thus come one heavenly king. This indicates that the world of hell also contains Buddhahood. In the sutra it says, there were demon daughters, the first named Lamba. The Buddha said to them, if you can shield and guard those who accept and uphold the mere name of the Lotus Sutra, your merit will be immeasurable. Thus the world of hungry spirits contains all of the 10 worlds. When the sutra speaks of the dragon girl attaining impartial and correct enlightenment, it is indicating that the world of animals has the 10 worlds. The sutra says that by listening to one verse or one phrase of the sutra, the Asura king Balin will attain the world of Asuras, that will attain supreme perfect enlightenment. Thus, the world of Asuras contains the 10 worlds. The sutra says, if there are persons who, for the sake of the Buddha, fashion and set up images, then all have attained the Buddha way, meaning that the world of human beings contains the 10 worlds. The sutra states that the great heavenly king Brahma and the other deities declared, we too in the same way will surely be able to attain Buddhahood. Thus the world of heavenly beings contains the 10 worlds. The sutra says Shariputra will be able to become a Buddha with the name Flower Glow, thus come one. Thus the world of voice hearers contains the 10 worlds. The sutra says those who seek to become Pratyeka Buddhas, monks, and nuns all press their palms and with reverent minds wish to hear the teaching of perfect enlightenment. Thus the world of Pratyeka Buddhas, or cause awakened ones, has the 10 worlds. The sutra describes the bodhisattvas who emerged from the earth, numerous as the dust particles of 1,000 worlds, and who declared, we ourselves wish to gain this great law, true and pure. Thus the world of bodhisattvas contains the 10 worlds. The sutra says, sometimes I speak of myself, sometimes of others. Thus the world of Buddhahood contains the 10 worlds. Question. Although I can see both my own 6 sense organs and those of others, I cannot see the 10 worlds in myself or others. How can I believe in them? Answer. The teacher of the law chapter, this is again page 357, second column. Answer. The teacher of the law chapter of the Lotus Sutra says this Lotus Sutra is the most difficult to believe and most difficult to understand in describing how difficult it will be to fulfill the teachings of the Lotus Sutra after the Buddha's passing. The Treasure Tower chapter speaks of the 6 difficult and 9 easy acts. The great teacher Tentai states, because the theoretical and the essential teachings of the Lotus Sutra contradict all the earlier sutras, they are extremely difficult to believe and difficult to understand. The great teacher Chang'an comments, the Buddha intended these as his ultimate teachings. How could they ever be easy to understand? The great teacher Dingyo says, the Lotus Sutra is the most difficult to believe and to understand because it is in it the Buddha directly revealed what he had attained. Those who were born in the days of Shakyamuni Buddha and heard his teachings in person had formed deep karmic bonds with him in past existences. In addition, Shakyamuni Buddha, the Lord of Teachings, as well as many treasures Buddha, the Buddhas of the 10 directions who are Shakyamuni's emanations, the countless bodhisattvas of the earth, and the other bodhisattvas such as Manjushri and Maitreya aided them and encouraged them to believe. But even then, there were those who failed to take faith. 5,000 people left the assembly arrogantly thinking that they had understood what they had not. All human and heavenly beings other than those already present in the assembly were moved to other worlds. Remember all this stuff, right? We'll have to reread the Lotus Sutra. How much more difficult it was to believe in the Lotus Sutra after the Buddha's passing, in the middle and former days of the law. And even more difficult it is now in the beginning of the latter day of the law. If it were easy for you to believe in, it would not be the Buddha's correct teaching. Question. The passages from the Lotus Sutra and the explanations by Tentai, Chang'an, and others that you have cited are free from obscurities and doubtful points. But you seem to be saying that fire is water or that black is white. Although they are the teachings of the Buddha, I find it difficult to accept them. Now I look repeatedly at people's faces, but I see only the human world. I do not see the other worlds. And the same is true when I look at my own face. How am I to believe in the 10 worlds? Answer. When we look from time to time at a person's face, we find him or her sometimes joyful, sometimes enraged, sometimes calm. At times, greed appears in the person's face. At times, foolishness, and at times, perversity. Rage is the world of hell. Greed is that of hungry spirits. Foolishness is that of animals. Perversity is that of the suras. Joy is that of humans, and calmness is that of human beings. These worlds, the 6 paths, are all present in the physical appearance of the person's face. The remaining 4 noble worlds are hidden and dormant and do not appear in the face. But if we watch carefully, we can tell that they are there. Question. Although I am not entirely certain about the 6 paths, it would appear from what you have said that we possess them. But what about the 4 noble worlds that cannot be seen at all? Answer. Earlier you doubted that the 6 lower worlds exist within the human world, but when I illustrated the point through an analogy, you understood. Perhaps it will be the same with the 4 noble worlds. I will try to employ reasoning to explain a bit about the matter. The fact that all things in this world are transient is perfectly clear to us, right? Moment by moment, everything's changing. It never repeats. It goes on to something else, right? Transient. It's perfectly clear to us. Is this not because the worlds of the 2 vehicles are present in the human world? Even a heartless villain. This is one of the first phrases that I underlined in this Gosho. Even a heartless villain loves his wife and children. He too has a portion of the bodhisattva world within him. So that meant that no matter how bad I am, I can do this. All right? Buddhahood is the most difficult to demonstrate. But since you possess the other 9 worlds, you should believe that you have Buddhahood as well. Do not permit yourself to have doubts. Expounding on the human world, the Lotus Sutra says The Buddhas wish to open the door of Buddha wisdom to all living beings. The Nirvana Sutra states, those who study the teachings of the great vehicle, though they have the eyes of ordinary beings, are said to have the eyes of the Buddha. That ordinary people born in the latter age can believe in the Lotus Sutra is due to the fact that the world of Buddhahood is present in the human world. Question. The Buddha clearly explained that each of the 10 worlds has the same 10 worlds within itself. Nonetheless, I find it difficult to believe, that our base hearts could be endowed with the world of Buddhahood. If I cannot believe it, I will become an Ichkantika, or a person of incorrigible disbelief. With your great compassion, please help me believe and save me from the torture of the Avicii hell. Answer. You have already seen and heard the sutra passage concerning the one great reason why the Buddhas appear in the world. If you still do not believe, then how can anyone from Shakyamuni Buddha on down to the 4 ranks of bodhisattvas, or we ordinary people of the latter age who are at the stage of being a Buddha in theory, save you from your disbelief? Nevertheless, I will try to explain. After all, some could not attain enlightenment through the direct teachings of the Buddha, but were able to do so later through the preaching of Ananda and other disciples. People can attain enlightenment in 2 ways, Nichiren says. By meeting the Buddha and hearing the Lotus Sutra, or by believing in the sutra even though they do not meet the Buddha. Even before the advent of the Buddha, some Brahmins in India realized the correct view of life through the 4 Vedas. In China, before the arrival of Buddhism, some realized the correct route through Taoism and Confucianism. Many bodhisattvas and ordinary people endowed with keen faculties perceived, even before they heard the Lotus Sutra, that Shakyamuni had planted the seeds of Buddhahood within them in the days of the Buddha great universal wisdom excellence, which was his dad, or in the far more distant past when he attained his original enlightenment. They understood this by hearing the Mahayana Sutras, by great universal wisdom excellence, Shakyamuni's dad, pardon me, I should have clarified that. They understood this by hearing the Mahayana Sutras of the flower garland correct and equal and wisdom periods. They were like Prakyeka Buddhas who could perceive the impermanence of life at the sight of scattering blossoms or falling leaves. These, then, are the type of people who gained the way through teachings other than the Lotus Sutra. Very exceptional people. But many who neither receive the seeds of Buddhahood nor form ties with the Buddha in past existences cling to Hinayana or provisional Mahayana teachings, and even if they are fortunate enough, but many who neither received the seeds of Buddhahood nor form ties with the Buddha in past existences cling to Hinayana or provisional Mahayana teachings, and even if they are fortunate enough to encounter the Lotus Sutra, which renounces all those mistaken expedient means, they cannot advance beyond their Hinayana or provisional Mahayana views. Sort of like you, Mr. Lee. They are convinced that their own views are correct, and as a result, they place the Lotus Sutra on the same level as the Hinayana Sutras or the provisional Mahayana Sutras, such as the Flower Garland and Mahavrachana. Some even regard the Lotus Sutra as subordinate to these. All the teachings of the Buddha are the same, right? That's what they used to believe. That's what the original thought had been. The Buddhist teachers who preach such views of the Lotus Sutra are inferior to the worthies and sages of Confucianism and Brahmanism. So why is he saying that? Because none of the sages of Confucianism or Brahmanism slandered the Lotus Sutra. And by diminishing the superior nature of the Lotus Sutra, to say it's the same as all the other teachings of Shakyamuni is slandering the law. And anybody that does that is less than those people that have not created that slander. Do you understand? The Confucianism didn't slander Buddhism. Get it? All right, so the Buddhist teachers who preach such views of the Lotus Sutra are inferior to the worthies and sages of Confucianism and Brahmanism. But let us set this matter aside for the moment. The mutual possession of the 10 worlds is as difficult to believe as fire existing in a stone or flowers within a tree. Yet under the right conditions, such phenomena actually occur and are believable. To believe that Buddhahood exists within the human world is the most difficult thing of all, as difficult as believing that fire exists in water or water in fire. Nevertheless, the dragon is said to produce fire from water and water from fire, and although people do not understand why, they believe it when they see it occur. Since you now believe that the human world contains the other 8 worlds, why are you still unable to include the world of Buddhahood? The Chinese sage kings Yao and Shun were impartial toward all people. They manifested one aspect of Buddhahood within the human world. Bodhisattva, never disparaging, saw the Buddha in everyone he met, and Prince Siddhartha was a human who became a Buddha. These examples should help you believe. And then we're going to go on to something else here. Note, the teachings that follow must be kept in strictest secrecy because they involve Nietzsche. But do you understand what he's essentially saying here too is that when we were talking last week about earthly desires equal enlightenment, that was the point that I was trying to make to Mr. Lee about how this works. When you start practicing, it's too difficult to believe that you're the Buddha. If you believed it, it would only be theoretical. It would only be believed because you read it and somebody told you that, you thought they had. It's very impossible for you to perceive that without having activated your Buddha nature through faith and practice.
Right.
You can't get there at the beginning without going through this process. It's through that you come to the realization, I am the Buddha. That's what happened to me. I read this writing so many times, and it's like scolding me. Asshole, are you reading this? Are you listening to what I'm saying, Tom? Why am I telling them they're all Buddhas and you can't believe that you're the Buddha just because you see all kinds of faults in yourself? All right? It has nothing to do with those faults.
Yes.
Okay? They don't stop you from being the Buddha.
Right.
They allow you to reach people that would not be reachable in the absence of those faults. Were you not born into this realm as a common mortal, how could you teach the common mortals?
Yeah. Right.
Okay? All right, so now he's going to get into true identity. Question, bottom of page 359. I'll read about another 10 minutes.
Okay.
Shakyamuni, the Lord of Teachings, is the Buddha who has completely destroyed the three... Question. Shakyamuni, the Lord of Teachings, is the Buddha who has completely destroyed the 3 categories of illusion. He is the sovereign of all rulers, bodhisattvas, persons of the 2 vehicles, human and heavenly beings, and others in the 10 directions. Whenever the Buddha moves, Brahma attends him on the left and Chakra on the right. The 4 kinds of Buddhists and the 8 kinds of non-human beings follow behind, while the Vajra-bearing gods march in the vanguard. With his 80,000 teachings, he leads all living beings to emancipation. Now, understand this is a question. Okay, this isn't Nietzsche and saying a bunch of stuff that you're going like, wow, this does... Because that's why I had to go through and highlight question, answer, because some of these questions are so long and they're so filled with BS. You're going, where did this fell off the turnip truck. Okay, with his 80,000 teachings, he leads all living beings to emancipation. How could a Buddha such as this dwell in the hearts of us ordinary people? Both the teachings before the Lotus Sutra and the theoretical teaching of the Lotus Sutra itself tell us that Shakyamuni Buddha attained enlightenment for the first time in this world. Searching for the cause of his enlightenment, we find that he practiced bodhisattva austerities in past existences as Prince Earnest Donor, Bodhisattva Learned Youth, King Shibi, and Prince Sattva. The Buddha practiced his austerities for 3 asamyak kalpas, or 100 major kalpas, or for kalpas equal to the number of countless dust particles, or for countless asamyak kalpas, or from the time he first set his mind on enlightenment, or for as long as a major world system dust particle kalpas. He served as many as 75, 76, or 77,000 Buddhas, passed through innumerable kalpas, and having completed his practice, became in this life Shakyamuni Buddha, the Lord of Teachings. Are you saying that within each of us exists the world of the Bodhisattva, which is endowed with all the blessings the Buddha attained as a result of his practice? Looking into the results of his practice, we see that Shakyamuni, the Lord of Teachings, first attained enlightenment in this life. For more than 40 years, the Buddha revealed himself in 4 different ways in the 4 kinds of teachings. Thus, by expounding the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings, the theoretical teaching of the Nirvana Sutra, he was able to benefit all living beings. When he preached the Lotus Treasury World in the Flower Garland Sutra, Shakyamuni appeared as Vairashana Buddha, seated on the lotus petal with the other Buddhists surrounding him in the 10 directions. When he preached in the Agama Sutras, he appeared as the Buddha who had eliminated illusions and attained the way by practicing 34 kinds of spiritual purification. When he preached the Correct and Equal Sutras, he was accompanied by a great multitude of Buddhas. 1,000 Buddhas joined him when he preached the Wisdom Sutras. In the Mahavrachana and Diamond Crown Sutras, he made a dignified appearance as the 1,200 and more honored ones. In the Treasure Tower chapter of the theoretical teaching of the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha manifested himself in 4 different ways, corresponding to the 4 kinds of lands. When the Buddha preached the Nirvana Sutra, those assembled saw him variously as a Buddha 16 feet tall, or as having a small or large body, as Vairashana Buddha, or as a Buddha with a body as vast as space. Thus he manifested 4 kinds of bodies. When the Buddha passed into extinction at the age of 80, he left his relics to benefit the people of the former, middle, and latter days of the law. Now the essential teaching of the Lotus Sutra says that Shakyamuni Buddha, the Lord of teachings, attained Buddhahood numberless major world system dust particle kalpas ago, and that the cause that made this possible was the practice he carried out at that time. Since then he has manifested emanation bodies throughout the worlds of the 10 directions, and preached all the sacred teachings of his lifetime to teach and convert people as numerous as the particles of dust of the land. When we compare the number of disciples in the essential teaching with that of the disciples of the theoretical teaching, the former is like the ocean, and the latter like a drop of water, or the one like a great mountain, and the other like a speck of dust. What is more, a bodhisattva of the essential teaching is far superior to any bodhisattva of the theoretical teaching, including Manjushri, perceiver of the world sounds, or any of the others who gathered from the worlds of the 10 directions. The difference between them is even greater than that between chakra and a monkey. Are you saying that besides these bodhisattvas, the persons of the 2 vehicles who obtained their enlightenment by destroying their illusions, Brahma, Chakra, the gods of the sun and the moon, the 4 heavenly kings, the 4 wheel-turning kings, and the immense flames of the great citadel of the hell of incessant suffering, all beings and all things in the 10 directions, are inherent in the 10 worlds and the 3,000 realms of our own lives? Even if you say that this is what the Buddha taught, I still cannot believe it. When we consider the matter in this light, we see that the sutras that came before the Lotus Sutra are genuine in both substance and wording. The Flower Garland Sutra describes enlightenment at the stage of security as ultimately perfect and free from all falsehood and defilement, like the empty sky. The Benevolent King Sutra reads, if one obtains the great wisdom of nirvana, one can penetrate the ultimate source of delusion and realize one's essential nature until nothing but wonderful wisdom remains. In the Diamond Wisdom Sutra, it says, when one reaches enlightenment, nothing but pure goodness will remain. Bodhisattva Ashvaghosha states in the Awakening of Faith on the Mahayana, only pure blessings exist within the matrix of the Thus Come One. Bodhisattva Vasubandhu remarks in his treatise on the consciousness only doctrine, when adamantine, what's that mean?
I don't know.
Okay,
Meditation.
when adamantine meditation is achieved, other remaining defilements and a lesser form of defilement will draw forth the ultimate consciousness of perfect clarity and total purity. Then, being no longer necessary, they will be abandoned forever. A careful comparison of the Lotus Sutra and the sutras taught before it shows that those sutras are innumerable and that they have been taught over a long time. Therefore, although both are the Buddha's teachings, if these 2 contradict each other, you should accept the earlier sutras. Bodhisattva Ashvaghosha was the Buddha's 11th successor, whose appearance had been foretold by the Buddha himself. Vasubandhu was the author of 1,000 treatises and was numbered among the 4 ranks of bodhisattvas. How then can you believe the great teacher Tentai, a lowly priest living far away from the birthplace of Buddhism, who interpreted the sutras but did not write a single treatise? Still, I might be able to disregard the many and accept the few if the Lotus Sutra said anything to prove this point. But where in the sutra can you find any passage that definitely passages that definitely verify the mutual possession of the 10 worlds, the 100 worlds and 1,000 factors, and 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. Now notice when he said here, what do you say about Tentai? He's qualifying the fact that Chang'an wrote it all. Tentai didn't write those 3 works. In the Lotus Sutra, we find the following passage. He, the Buddha, has rooted out evil from among the phenomena. Neither Bodhisattva Vasubandhu's treatise on the Lotus Sutra nor Bodhisattva Saramati's treatise on the treasure vehicle of Buddhahood makes any mention of mutual possession of the 10 worlds. Nor are there any writings by the great teachers of the northern and southern schools in China or by the priests of the 7 temples of Japan that expound this principle. It is simply Tentai's own biased view, and Dengyo made the mistake of transmitting it. That is what the teacher of the nation Xing Liang meant when he said this is an error of Tentai's. The Dharma teacher Hui Yan said, by defining Hinayana doctrines as Tripitaka teachings, Tentai has confused Hinayana and Mahayana, for both contain the Tripitaka, or 3 divisions of the canon. Yoko criticized him, saying, Tentai is the only one who did not understand the true teaching of the Flower Garland Sutra. Tokuitsu reproached him, saying, see here, Chi, whose disciple are you? With a tongue less than 3 inches long, you slandered the teachings that come from the Buddha's long, broad tongue that can cover even his face. The great teacher Kobo commented, the Buddhist teachers of China abide with one another to steal the ghee of the Dharanis, or true word, and claim that it is the possession of their own school. Thus, the doctrine of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life is not mentioned in either the provisional or true teaching of Shakyamuni Buddha. It did not appear in the writings of any of the 4 ranks of Indian scholars, and no Chinese or Japanese teacher has ever espoused it. How then do you dare to believe it? I'm going to go ahead and read just this answer, and it'll go on. Okay, I don't want to stop here. I'll have to reread the question next week. Okay, Answer, page 362. It only goes for a couple of columns. Your criticisms are extremely harsh. Nonetheless, the differences between the Lotus Sutra and the other sutras are clear from the text of the sutras themselves. In them, we find statements that the Buddha did not reveal the truth in the first 42 years of his teaching, and that he will reveal it in the Lotus Sutra. Many treasures Buddha and the Buddhas of the 10 directions presented themselves to attest to the truth of the Lotus Sutra, something they did not do for any other sutra. With the Lotus Sutra, Shakyamuni enabled the people of the 2 vehicles to attain Buddhahood, whereas with the earlier sutras, he did not. In the earlier sutras, he stated that he attained enlightenment for the first time in this world, but in the Lotus Sutra, he revealed that his enlightenment actually occurred in the remote past. I will now address the problems posed by the scholars you mentioned above. The great teacher Tentai comments, Vasubandhu and Nagarjuna clearly perceived the truth in their hearts, but they did not teach it. Instead, they employed the provisional Mahayana teachings which were suited to the times. The Buddhist teachers who came later, however, were biased in their understanding, and the scholars obstinately clung to their own views, until in the end they began to battle with one another. Each defended one small corner of the teachings, and thereby completely departed from the sacred way of the Buddha. The great teacher Chang'an says of Tentai, even the great scholars of India were not in a class with him, and the Chinese teachers, well, one need hardly mention them. This is no idle boast. The doctrines he taught were indeed of such excellence. In their hearts, Vasubandhu, Nagarjuna, Ashwagosha, Saramati, and other Buddhist scholars knew the doctrine of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, but they did not reveal it to others because the time for it to be expounded had not yet come. As for the Buddhist teachers in China who preceded Tentai, some kept this treasure in their hearts and others knew nothing about it. Among those who came after, some accepted this doctrine only after first trying to disprove it, and others never accepted it at all. Concerning the passage in the Lotus Sutra that you quoted, he, the Buddha, has rooted out all evil from among the phenomena. Here the Buddha is referring to a teaching from one of the earlier sutras. When you take a closer look at the sutra, it is clear that the mutual possession of the 10 worlds is being explained. For in the same sutra this passage is found. The Buddhas wish to open the door of the Buddha wisdom to all living beings. Tentai comments on this passage as follows. If people do not possess innate Buddha wisdom, how could the Buddha say he wanted to open it? One must understand that Buddha wisdom is inherent in all human beings. The great teacher Chang'an concludes, how could people open the door and realize their Buddha wisdom if it did not exist within them? How could a person show the poor woman her treasure repository if the treasure repository did not exist? It is, however, extremely difficult to convince you that Shakyamuni Buddha, the Lord of Teaching, exists within us, just as the other 9 worlds do, because he's representative Buddha. Therefore, he gives us this admonishment beforehand. Among the sutras I have preached, now preach, and will preach, this Lotus Sutra is the most difficult to believe and the most difficult to understand. And the 6 difficult and 9 easy acts he expounds in the next chapter explains how difficult it is. Hence, the great teacher Chentai states, because the theoretical and the essential teachings of the Lotus Sutra contradict all the earlier sutras, they are extremely difficult to believe and difficult to understand, no less difficult than facing an enemy who is armed with a spear. The great teacher Chang'an comments, the Buddha intended these as his ultimate teachings. How could they ever be easy to understand? The great teacher Dingyo remarks, the Lotus Sutra is the most difficult to believe and to understand because in it the Buddha directly revealed what he had attained. In the more than 1800 years after the Buddha's passing, only 3 persons throughout the 3 countries perceived this correct doctrine. They are Shakyamuni Buddha of India, the great teacher Chentai Chichie of China, and the great teacher Dingyo of Japan. These 3 men are all Buddhist sages. Okay, I'll stop there.
Thank you.
Next week we'll start on page 363, second column. Question, what about Nagarjuna and Vasubandhu? Thank you.
Thank you.